Africa, a continent of ancient kingdoms, deep cultures, and endless beauty, but also a land whose story was interrupted, reshaped, and resisted. This is the story of a continent that refused to remain silent. A story of voices that rose from villages, from deserts, from mountains and cities. A story of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable spirit of a people determined to reclaim their destiny. Today, we explore Africa's long road to independence. Before the storm, a continent of nations. Before the world redrew Africa like lines on a map. Before the exploitation, the invasions, the colonies, Africa was thriving. Empires like Mali, Songhai, Congo, Ethiopia, Benin, and Great Zimbabwe stood as centers of trade, science, art, and culture. Cities were connected by gold routes, salt roads, and powerful alliances. Africa was not waiting for discovery. Africa was writing its own story. But the world had other plans. The scramble, how it all changed. In the late 1800s, European nations gathered in a room in Berlin, without a single African present, and divided an entire continent like pieces of land on a board. This moment was called the Scramble for Africa. Colonial powers invaded with armies, forced labor, taxation, and new borders that ignored centuries of African identity. Traditional leaders were removed, cultures were suppressed, wealth was extracted. Yet, beneath the oppression, something began to grow. Resistance. The rise of resistance. From the deserts of Algeria to the forests of Ghana, from Kenya's highlands to the streets of Accra and Nairobi, Africa rose. Some resisted with weapons. Some resisted with words. Some resisted with ideas that would change history. Names like Samori Touré, Queen Zinga, Abdelkader Yarasantawa, and Menelik II became symbols of defiance. Even when colonial armies crushed rebellions, they could not crush the desire for freedom. A new generation was emerging, one educated, bold, outspoken, and determined to reclaim Africa's future. The birth of modern African nationalism. By the mid-1900s, African thinkers, students, soldiers, and workers began to unite under one idea. Africa must be free. The Second World War weakened European powers. African soldiers who fought overseas returned with a new understanding of freedom. Cities became centers of political discussion. Newspapers, unions, and movements began to rise. Leaders appeared across the continent. Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Patrice Lumumba, Amilcar Cabral, Jomo Kenyatta, Nelson Mandela, and so many others. Leaders who would become the architects of liberation. A new fire was burning. The first breakthrough. Ghana leads the way. In 1957, the world watched something powerful. Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African country to gain independence. Kwame Nkrumah stood before thousands and declared, "The independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked with the total liberation of Africa." This moment shook the world. It sent a message to every colony. Freedom is possible. Africa is awakening. The wave, a continent reborn. The years that followed became known as the African independence wave. One by one, the chains fell. Nigeria, Senegal, Mali, Madagascar, Congo, Somalia, Cameroon, Tanzania, Zambia, Kenya, Botswana, Lesotho, Uganda. A tidal wave of independence swept the continent through the 1960s. Flags rose. National anthems played. Tears flowed. A continent long silenced finally spoke again. But freedom would not come without challenges. The struggle continues, the hard years. After independence, Africa faced the heavy shadows left behind. Artificial borders, divided ethnic groups, economic systems designed for extraction, foreign influence, internal conflicts. Some nations fell into coups, assassinations, or civil wars. Some leaders were removed or killed. The fight for independence had ended, but the fight for stability had just begun. Yet even in the darkest years, hope refused to die. The final battles. Southern Africa. While most of Africa freed itself in the 1960s, Southern Africa faced different challenges. Angola and Mozambique fought long wars against colonial rule. Zimbabwe fought a bitter struggle for liberation, and South Africa battled the brutal system of apartheid. For decades, the world watched activists, freedom fighters, and ordinary citizens rise against oppression. From Soweto to Robben Island, the spirit of resistance burned. Finally, by the 1990s, the last pillars of colonial rule collapsed. South Africa became free. A free continent, but not finished. Today, Africa stands independent. Not perfect, not without challenges, but undeniably free. Free to build, to grow, to dream, to rise. The story of Africa's independence is not just about battles or borders. It is about identity. It is about dignity. It is about reclaiming a stolen narrative. The message of Africa. Africa's journey to independence is proof of one truth. A people who refuse to be broken cannot be defeated. From ancient empires to colonial oppression, from resistance to liberation, Africa stands today because its people chose courage over fear, unity over division, and hope over despair. This is not the end of the story. This is the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter still being written by millions of Africans every day. Africa is rising. Africa is becoming. Africa is home.